For Claire Donovan, that Monday morning didn't feel like any other. The sunlight still poured through the boutique's glass walls. The soft chime of the entry bell rang each time a customer walked in. Her team, three skilled stylists, were busy pulling vintage pieces from racks for clients. Claire's eyes were on the fitting of a custom gown, but her mind, it was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quiet, somewhere filled with the faint footsteps of a fear she hadn't yet named. And then her phone buzzed. She reached beneath the counter, expecting a delivery update or a text from her assistant. But the screen read Mark, her husband, her partner of 14 years. One line glowed back at her. Left for Miami with Melissa. Don't call. Joint account's been closed. Claire's fingers froze midair. Time didn't stop. Not for the customers trying on dresses, not for her assistants giving style advice, but for Claire, something stilled. The room kept moving, unaware that a fault line had just cracked beneath her heels. But Claire didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse into the nearest chair. Her face remained calm, eerily calm, as if the message was no more than a change to a delivery schedule. Inside, a storm was rising, but on the surface, stillness. Mark's text hadn't surprised her. It had only confirmed what her gut had been whispering for months, that she wasn't crazy. For the last 3 months, Claire had tried to reason with herself, tried to dismiss the voice in her head that said something was wrong. But it had started adding up. Mark's sudden obsession with fitness, late nights in the name of networking, the way he guarded his phone like it held state secrets, changing passwords, slipping away. She noticed they had started in love, college sweethearts. They had weathered job losses, relocations, health scares. When Claire decided to leave her nursing job to open her boutique, Mark had supported it at first. But over time, his tone shifted. What once was admiration became mockery. He no longer called it her dream. He called it her little hobby. At first, Claire chalked it up to stress, a midlife phase, but then the pattern sharpened, the sleek new suits, the mystery receipts with names she'd never heard, and the one thing she couldn't ignore, the emotional distance. One night, Mark accidentally left his iPad at home. Claire hadn't planned to snoop, but when the screen lit up, there it was. A search history full of things like romantic getaways for couples in Miami. Still, Claire didn't confront him. She didn't ask, didn't accuse, because she knew emotions alone wouldn't win this battle. Planning would. The next day, she opened a new bank account under the boutique's name. Quietly, she began rerouting all revenue into that account. Every payment, every invoice, every deposit, all transitioned to a system only she controlled. Claire understood something crucial. If Mark was going to make a move, he'd make it through the joint account, so she left it untouched. Let him believe she wasn't watching, that she was still blind. In the background, Claire consulted a lawyer, Jennifer White, a sharp, fearless attorney who specialized in divorce and asset protection. Claire laid everything out, the history, the suspicion, the silence. Jennifer didn't blink. She gave her a plan. Stay calm, gather evidence, secure everything in your name. Keep a record of every message, every email. Claire, she'd said, you don't need to prove you're heartbroken. You need to prove you were prepared. In court, tears don't win. Facts do. Claire didn't tell anyone on her team. Not her stylists, not her customers. She ran the boutique like always, advising clients, adjusting seams, uploading new collection photos on the store's social media page. From the outside, she was composed, polished, professional. But inside, she was holding pieces of herself together with threadbare strength. Mark had stopped calling. He only texted now, brief and distant. Busy today, out with clients, late dinner meeting. Claire saved each message, screenshot after screenshot, into a folder named quietly on her cloud drive. His absence was no longer subtle, it was visible. His shirts were missing. His favorite watch was gone. The shaving kit, the one he wouldn't even travel without, had disappeared from the bathroom shelf. The house had started feeling like a rental of memories. Every night, lying in bed alone, Claire whispered to herself, I am not weak. I am not alone. I am the beginning of a story, not the end. And when that final text came, the one that said he'd left for Miami with Melissa, something inside her didn't break. It aligned. She placed the phone down gently, refocused on the voices inside the boutique, and sat behind the counter. She exhaled, deeply, then thought to herself, now it's my turn. That was the real beginning, not when he left, but when she stopped seeing herself as someone he abandoned and started writing the story he never thought she'd have the courage to tell. 3 days into Mark's Miami escape, and Claire still hadn't said a word to anyone. Not her staff, not the neighbors, not even her old friends who once held their marriage up like a trophy. What she did instead was simple. She started building a record, not made of emotions, but facts. Cold, steady, undeniable facts. It was time to activate the plan. Step 1, the credit card company. Claire knew Mark had booked his trip using their joint credit account. Flights, hotel, luxury rental car, all of it. When the customer service rep picked up, Claire's voice was calm, composed, and precise. Hi, I'd like to report unauthorized charges on my joint credit card account. She was transferred to the fraud department. Claire listed everything: transaction dates, locations, merchant names, even the verification codes. Her voice didn't waver. She had spent 2 days gathering every detail. Within hours, the company froze the card and flagged the charges. Mark may have thought he was sipping cocktails in Miami, secure in his betrayal. But Claire? She had already pulled the rug from beneath him. She sent Jennifer a short text. Phase 1, done. Jennifer replied instantly. Time for phase 2. Claire's next step, the text messages. Since leaving, Mark had started sending her strange, disjointed messages. Some mocking. Hope your little shop is keeping you busy. Some pathetic. It's not you. I just need to live a little before I get too old. And some cruel. Melissa is young, vibrant, and understands me better than you ever did. Claire didn't respond. She didn't react. She just documented. Every message was screenshot, uploaded to the cloud, and emailed directly to Jennifer. Jennifer had texted earlier. He's writing his own judgment. Just let him keep talking. One night, Claire opened Melissa's Instagram profile. Melissa, the office receptionist she'd first met at the company Christmas party. Back then, Mark had said casually, she's new, harmless. But Claire remembered the way Melissa's eyes lingered on Mark's jokes a second too long. She'd brushed off the suspicion as insecurity. Now, that same profile had a post. Palm trees, margaritas, and magic. Mark's half-visible arm in the background. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply took a screenshot and added it to the folder. She sent an email to Melissa's old company address. Professional tone. No exclamation marks. Hi, Melissa. This is Claire. I know everything. I won't make a scene. But you've attached yourself to a man who's burning everything he had. Let's see how long you last in that heat. Then she blocked her. No threats, no drama. Just a scorched truth, sent and sealed. Following Jennifer's advice, Claire filed for an emergency court hearing. Mark had mocked her finances, her emotions, her dignity. But Claire wasn't looking for revenge. She was asking for justice. And she had every receipt to show that she had tried to save the marriage with grace. while Mark had dismantled it with arrogance. Mark was still texting, sometimes mocking emojis, sometimes guilt trips. One message read, "Let's just split things 50-50 and move on. You'll never find anyone better than me anyway." Claire replied with one sentence. "I already did." "Her name is Claire," Jennifer responded. No more replies, let him bury himself. Meanwhile, Claire had fully stabilized her boutique. All the business documents were in her name. Mark had never realized he would be locked out of a business built right under his nose. Claire forwarded Jennifer the full asset folder: the house deed, boutique lease, incorporation papers. Not one line bore Mark's name. Her world no longer stood on emotion. It stood on paperwork. She had been broken. But now, where the cracks once were, steel had grown. Now came the next step, the court hearing, and Claire had every weapon ready. But her strongest armor was her silence and her dignity. Outside the courtroom, it was gently raining, a soft drizzle that felt foreign to Los Angeles' usual sun, as if even the weather had chosen sides. Claire wore a black tailored suit, the same one she wore on the boutique's grand opening. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun. No heavy makeup, just a calm in her eyes that said, "I've already won because I reclaimed me." Mark entered the courtroom in full designer flair: white jacket, slim pants, and a flashy watch that likely came from one of his clients. His smile screamed smug confidence, like he still thought he was winning some game. Melissa wasn't with him. Maybe even she knew. The show was over. The judge entered, Honorable Judge Harris, a man of few words, no visible warmth, no tolerance for ego. Claire's attorney, Jennifer, stood poised with a folder in her hand. And Claire knew it wasn't just filled with paper, it was filled with truth. Mark's lawyer was the opposite: bold voice, big purse, and a reputation for dominating courtrooms with dramatic flair. But Jennifer's strength was her quiet power. She spoke softly, but every word landed like a gavel strike. The hearing began. Mark's attorney stood up and did exactly what Claire had expected. She called the boutique a hobby and tried to paint Mark as the victim of emotional abandonment. She claimed he had been neglected in the marriage, that Melissa was a moment of clarity, and that Claire had lost interest in being a wife. Claire sat silently through it all. No raised eyebrows, no reaction. Then Jennifer stood up. What followed wasn't just a legal rebuttal. It was a masterclass in quiet power. First, she pulled out the joint bank statements, showing clearly how Mark had drained the account without Claire's consent. Then came the credit card reports, flagged charges, the official fraud claim, and confirmation from the bank itself. Next, she displayed the text messages. One by one, they appeared on the courtroom screen. "Hope your little shop keeps you busy in your old age. Melissa understands me better than you ever did. It's not you, it's me. I need to live a little." The room grew quieter with every word. Mark's shoulders began to slump. His cocky smirk started slipping. His gaze dropped. Then Jennifer presented the boutique's performance reports. 3 years of profit graphs, growth numbers, social media analytics, brand collaborations. She paused and turned toward the judge. "Your Honor," she said, voice firm but composed. "This is not a hobby. This is a business. A profitable, sustainable, women-run enterprise that Mr. Mark belittled, while quietly siphoning off marital assets." Mark had no words, just silence, just shame. Judge Harris reviewed everything, without interruption, without expression. Then came the verdict. Claire was granted full ownership of all previously registered assets: the boutique, the house, the brand. Mark was ordered to pay restitution for the credit card fraud. A restraining order was placed. Mark was legally barred from contacting Claire by any means, text, email, or otherwise. As Mark exited the courtroom, he muttered under his breath in frustration. Melissa wasn't waiting outside, just a cab. The driver barely looked up from his phone. Claire stood by Jennifer just outside the doors. Jennifer took her hand and smiled gently. "It's done," she said. "You didn't just win in court. You won in every way that counts." Claire didn't cry. She didn't need to. She took a breath, and she smiled. There was no more Mark, no more Melissa, no more betrayal. There was just Claire. 6 months had passed since the divorce, but for Claire, it felt less like time had passed and more like a new life had begun. Mark's world had slowly crumbled after the courtroom, and Claire's? It had flourished. Her boutique, once dismissed as a little shop, was now one of the most talked about fashion spaces in the city. She opened a second location in an upscale neighborhood, surrounded by high-end clientele and steady growth. Mark was no longer with Melissa. Weeks after the court ruling, she left. And soon after, so did his money. He was now living in a small room at his parents' house. The same man who once called Claire basic and outdated, now reduced to the echo of his own arrogance. Claire received a message from Melissa, a small apology. "I didn't know the full story. I'm sorry." Claire didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her days were full now. Her boutique had 8 employees, 2 interns, and even a brand manager. And Claire? She still knew everyone's name, their shifts, their coffee orders, and their dogs' names. She wasn't just a boss, she was a builder. She'd learned that trust isn't declared, it's earned. And that lesson had come the hard way. One afternoon, Amanda, Mark's sister, walked into the boutique. She looked nervous. Claire saw her and smiled softly. Amanda said, "I owe you an apology for never really seeing how strong you were." Claire replied calmly, "You don't owe me anything. Just don't make the same mistake again. Not with yourself, not with anyone else." Amanda's eyes welled up. She hugged Claire and whispered, "I'm proud to have known you." Claire Donovan was no longer just the owner of a boutique. Her Instagram page had thousands of followers. Women who looked up to her, dreamed of starting their own businesses, or simply wanted to know how to live after heartbreak. Claire never used her personal trauma as content. She didn't post breakdowns or tear-filled videos. Her silence and steady grace were her loudest statement. Every evening before closing the boutique, Claire made herself a cup of coffee and sat in the corner of her office, watching the city lights through the glass. That day, she opened her journal and wrote, "He said I'd crumble. I didn't. I redefined myself, not to prove anything to him, but to remember who I've always been." Mark still texted sometimes, a simple, "Hey," or "I miss you." Once, "Can we talk?" Claire never opened them. Her phone number hadn't changed, but now it was just a screen, a window she opened only on her own terms. Claire knew now revenge wasn't the loudest answer. She didn't hate Melissa. She had no grudge against Amanda. And Mark? He was just a face lost somewhere in her past. She was facing forward now, and the road ahead was bright, sharp, and entirely her own. Claire's third boutique opened on an autumn afternoon filled with soft sunlight and a crisp sweetness in the air. There were no roses, no champagne popping. The launch mirrored Claire herself. Quiet, layered, purposeful. Every corner of the space echoed her brand. Simplicity wrapped in quiet strength. She didn't have a business degree, but experience had taught her more than any textbook could. Customers didn't just walk in to buy clothes. They came for the energy Claire had woven into her space, an energy that whispered, "You're not broken. You're powerful." Conference invites flooded Claire's inbox regularly now. but she only attended the ones that mattered. One day, an email arrived from a women's entrepreneurship summit titled Successful Women Who Rebuilt Themselves. Claire paused for a moment and said yes. The conference hall was packed: college students, women from small towns, media teams, and emerging brands. When Claire stepped onto the stage, there was that same smile on her face, the one that had survived even her darkest days. "I didn't come here to tell you a story about divorce," she began. "I came here to tell you a story about rebirth, about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my future." The silence was heavy, but it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Claire spoke of how she started her boutique from an old garage. She recalled the voices she had to fight along the way, the ones that said, "It's just a hobby. This won't go anywhere." Those days are gone when women built businesses. She never mentioned Melissa. She never named Mark. But everyone who knew her story knew who she was really talking about. After the session, girls lined up to meet her. Some showed their sketchbooks, some shared their business plans, and some simply said, "Thank you. I needed this." That night, Claire received a call from Mark's mother. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "You showed our family the difference between enabling and accountability. You leaving and rising like this, it changed everything." Claire took a breath, then said, "Thank you for calling. I always knew you weren't like Mark." The call ended, and Claire felt like an old thread of misunderstanding had quietly untangled itself. Now she was mentoring women. She launched an online class titled Brand Yourself, Not Your Pain, where she taught women like her to build businesses not around their wounds, but their worth. One girl once asked, "Ma'am, did you ever get revenge?" Claire smiled. "I did. I just redefined what revenge meant. Mine wasn't fueled by hate. It was fueled by planning. My weapon wasn't tears. It was action. And my battleground wasn't a courtroom. It was my boutique." Claire wasn't just selling clothes anymore. She was selling confidence. Every woman who walked out with a piece of fabric left with something more: the belief that she, too, could be someone like Claire. 5 years had passed. Claire's boutique was no longer just a store. It had become a brand. She had branches in 5 cities. Her face had been on the cover of a national magazine. But the real milestone wasn't the title, founder and CEO. It was the unshakable confidence with which she now entered any room, no matter who was sitting in it. One morning at her flagship store, Claire was doing what she always did: straightening displays, polishing mirrors, sipping tea with her team before the doors opened. Then the HR manager called. "Ma'am, the new sales girl, Melissa, just arrived. Should I send her in?" Claire closed her eyes for a second, then smiled. "Yes, send her in." Melissa, barely 19, walked in nervously, trying to smile. "Ma'am, I just wanted to ask where we keep the gift wrap ribbons." Claire looked into her eyes, innocent, anxious, but full of hope. The name Melissa gave her a slight sting at first, but also brought a strange sense of peace. Once, that name had shattered her world. Now, it stood before her as a symbol of fresh beginnings. Claire smiled gently. "Shelf 3 and Melissa. Take your time, no rush." Melissa nodded and left. Claire turned to the mirror in her office. Her hair now had hints of silver. Faint lines traced the edges of her eyes. But her face held the kind of strength that comes not from youth, but from growth. Behind her, on the wall, a familiar frame still hung. Mark's final text, printed and preserved. "At least you have your little shop to keep you busy in your old age." And right beneath it, Claire's newest award, Best Regional Woman Entrepreneur of the Year. She took a deep breath and thought, "Thank you, Mark, for underestimating me." That same day, her team surprised her. They had commissioned a mural on the center wall of the boutique. In it, Claire stood tall outside her first store, holding a checkbook and a paintbrush. Behind her were bold words. She didn't fight him. She built something he couldn't break. Claire's eyes welled up, not with pain, but with peace, with pride. Mark now lived alone in a small apartment. His dating profile still had the same old photo. It read, young at heart, looking for love, still believe in magic. But no one was searching for that magic anymore. Claire didn't need an apology or closure or even validation because she had already given the world her answer. She had everything she once wished for: a name, a purpose, a family she built herself, and a voice that would never be silenced again. This is where her story ends, but not her beginning. Every morning for Claire was a new start. Now it's your turn. If you were in Claire's shoes, would you forgive or fight back? Do you believe success is the ultimate answer to betrayal? Have you ever removed someone from your life just to find your true self? Tell us in the comments below. Your story could be someone's courage, and thank you for watching till the end. Stay strong, stay unshakable.